I am Kehinde Wiley. Welcome to my studio. Today we're going to have a look at the most recent paintings. What you're looking at here is pretty much the beginning of a very sort of over-the-top, massive painting that's probably going to take me forever to complete, but the idea was to begin a conversation about equestrian portraiture and its relationship to painting, and also about masculinity, power, control. A lot of those subjects are things that I deal with quite a bit in my work. And obviously, equestrian portraiture occupies a certain space in painting, conceptually. I think, obviously, it speaks to scale. It speaks to the heroicizing and building of myths. It speaks also to, I think, the construction of identity. And those are things that I explore quite a bit in relationship to the black male body in public space. And things that rely on the language of the contemporaneous, but also the historic. What I generally start off with is an underpainting, and none of this is complete right now. All of the horse work is the first sepia layered tones that then go in and get reworked. And this is really sort of painting in the 21st century. All of the work has been run through Photoshop. All of the models have been shot in various poses that are independent of the horses. On the computer, we digitally change scale, color is affected. It's neither the original nor anything completely new. It's this type of third object. The China series began when I was invited to do a residency in Beijing at the studio of two friends of mine. And really it was a way of getting out of New York, trying to really kind of create a lab. And perhaps one of the most fascinating eras in which Chinese painting took a turn had to do with the Cultural Revolution. And these were the paintings that came out of the Mao years. Really amazing pictures of, people sort of smiling, looking furtively into the future, notions of defending the country. By inserting the black body, the meaning has shifted quite radically. This one here. This is the makings of, I think, what will be a really kind of disturbing picture. It had to do with the defense of the nation, but it's also the mixture of violence and joy, that jarring sense in which people are preparing explosives, but then gazing back at the viewer with a sense of like pride and accomplishment. I think it carries a lot of resonance with the work that I do and the ideas that I'm interested in, particularly the notion of identity being something that's rather fugitive. Oftentimes you'll look at a type of blackness that's portrayed in media stereotypes that has very little to do with, I think, an actuality that's lived. And for me, it's that connective or cognitive dissonance that exists, that identity that exists in the gaps between fiction and truth. I don't think I'm entirely critical of it, and I don't think I'm entirely independent or redemptive in a way. I think partly what I do is to resuscitate a type of language and allow that interplay to be its own work of art. Now, something like this was, I think, a bit more indicative of the way that body language can be toyed with. I was again using Chinese decorative tradition and using the poses from the Mao years, the Cultural Revolution paintings. This is kind of a perfect chance to give you a sense of my technique. Most of the painting starts with what I call a wash of burnt umber. And that's simply a turpentine and paint wash. That's a very sort of classic technique that utilized the white of the canvas as a way of allowing the light to show through. And then obviously the skin is then painted on top of that. It's based on Hans Holbein the Younger's portrait of Christ. And you can see I've got some small studies on the wall that I'm working on. In this picture, I wanted to not only mix the specter of the dead body, but also what was usually really resplendent and bright colors with floral backgrounds in my paintings, now becomes the sort of decaying, dying leaf. Most of the models that I choose are complete strangers, people who I meet in the streets who are quite honestly just minding their own business, walking down the street. The people who people these paintings are invited to my studio. We go through books and books of classic paintings, and with the exception of this piece, most of the models actually choose the poses themselves. The procedure in the beginning was to simply pull models from the streets, and there was a very direct and real relationship between who that person was walking down the street that very day, what that person was wearing that day, and what you see in the painting. In fact, what occurs many times is that I'll plant people who've been pulled from modeling agencies as professional models, who've been completely cast down to the height and weight of the model. It has a very, I think, more honest relationship with this image-making thing that that I'm certainly involved with. You know, I began painting at a very early age. My mother sent me to art classes at the age of 11 in Los Angeles. And this was, you know, Los Angeles in the 80s wasn't exactly the most safe and secure place in South Central. So we did find a public school that would take us on the weekends. The program would take me to some of the great museums and collections of Los Angeles. And I remember going to places like the Huntington Library and looking at the great 19th century British portraiture. I remember looking at early works like Copley's and Gainsborough's, looking at those amazing portraits of really European aristocracy showing off their wealth in ways that were, I think, really foreign to me. And that complete disconnect between those two worlds acted almost in a way of allowing me to enter them in a way that was pure. There was this type of absolute fascination, and that was something that began in Los Angeles, but that remained a fascination all the way through my undergraduate education, on through Yale. My goal in Harlem was to simply look at the community around me. Harlem was a pedestrian place where you would see the pageantry of young black people in the streets communicating with each other in ways that were visual in some very primary ways. There was a moment in Harlem that really resonated with me. I remember walking down 125th Street one day and seeing a piece of paper blowing in the wind. It was this sort of crumpled piece of paper with a very sympathetic face on it. I looked a little bit closer to it, and it turned out to be an actual mugshot. And it got me thinking about the nature of mugshots. Are they portraiture? And so I actually began a series of paintings that were based upon the mugshot and the positioning of the body. And I think it really got me thinking about how powerful portraiture can be, and how complicated a language it is. And particularly in the work that I'm exploring today, the language has become so complicated and so multifarious. It's dependent upon nationhood and ethnic identity, class, and all of these things go into the bodies of work that have evolved over time. But within all of that, what's been central to it has to do with the ways that we codify and read the black male body, the ways in which our own desires as a people become fixed in meaning. Our own fears as a people become fixed in meaning.